Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the US Futures weekly chart analysis for the week ending 27th of March 2026. The first chart is the US dollar index futures, and they continue to consolidate within the range of this up bar 3 weeks ago. You can see the markets trading in this range up here. There was a little dip below the previous bar's close earlier in the week, where the market tested for supply, then popped up to close back in this range above, which is possibly where the market's going to spend most of its time consolidating at this point in time. There was no attempt to push higher or challenge the highs of the range. This was really a consolidation in the top half of this bar here to solidify its position in this new higher range up here at that level. The slightly higher close put some pressure on some associated markets, but it wasn't too overwhelming for them. And any markets that did show signs of recovery, while this market still pushed higher, suggests that those markets are trading quite strongly. This is the E-mini S&P. This is S&P 500 index futures. They continue to roll over at this point. There was an attempt to hold the market up earlier in the week, but the market continues to close below the previous bar's low. This market is rolling over. Prices pulled back to this level. It is a fairly logical level for the market to come to. So there may be a further attempt to support at this level, I expect. Something in here. It may not be successful, but there'll probably be an attempt to consolidate around this level. You can see the next lower levels below that if the market does continue to roll over. I do expect there'll be some form of buying support emerge this week. Always be aware that the first signs of buying support in a market is fraught with danger, because any attempt to support the market can easily be dumped if sentiment changes for whatever reason. The market really is quite reactive at the moment. It's not trading proactively, and it's not showing any great intent. The market's just reacting to news as it's released. This is the 10-year note futures, and they've continued to push lower, although the thrust lower has shortened somewhat. Price came down and tagged this level below. It's still closed below the previous bar's low, so there's still weakness in this market. There was, however, a slight close off the week's low on an increase in volume and above average volume, so there was some buying support emerge in this market. We'll just have to see if that continues again next week. So there's been a modest attempt to support the market. Copper price futures. Copper price futures did close higher this week. Some buying support has emerged in this market. You can see that the market did test for supply below the previous bar's close, and it did reject moving lower below this next level lower, and it pushed up instead. So this was a sign of strength for this market. Buying support has emerged in here. I do expect the market will probably trade just sideways in here and consolidate for a period, but you have seen buying support emerge at this point in time. Gold price futures, similar in some respects to the copper price futures. You've seen some buying support emerge in this market as well. The market did push lower and well below the previous bar's low, but it rejected continuing lower, reversed, and closed back at that important level adjacent to the previous bar's low. You've seen buying support emerge on an increase in volume and just slightly above average volume. So This wasn't just low volume trade. There was reasonable activity in this market, and it has shown a rejection of moving lower and attempt to support the market. This is the first signs of buying support emerging in this market since price pulled back here. We'll watch for that to continue next week. I don't expect this market will just rocket higher. I think the market will probably go sideways or just slightly up if it really is strong. Silver price futures, similar to gold to a large extent, as you'd expect. You've seen a rejection of the market moving lower, and you've seen some buying support emerge. Not as strong as gold price futures, which were slightly above average, but you have seen the market close back above the previous bar's low and adjacent to the previous bar's close as a very slight up bar this week. So you have seen some buying support emerge in this market. Would have perhaps preferred to see volumes a bit higher, because markets can just float up on a lack of selling pressure, and when the selling pressure does re-emerge, there's not enough buyers there to hold the market up and it crashes down easy. So we just watch this market. It does follow gold generally, and the gold price did see buying support emerge on above average volume. So you would suggest that if gold gets a bid, this probably will here as well. This is light crude price futures, and they continue to consolidate within the range of the 3-week up bar, this bar here. The market does continue to respect this level here, the June 22 highs. The market's consolidating sideways adjacent to that bar's close in here. And you really have had a test and a shakeout, and that often means the market will attempt to break out. So we'll see if that comes off this week. But the market is certainly consolidating quite strongly within the range of this up bar, and it's respecting the level here that I've got marked. Volume remains around the average, just slightly above. This is excessive volume up here. You really want to see the volumes more like this. So that's genuine trading. The market continues to look strong at this point in time. Onto the currencies now. This is the Euro-US dollar currency pair. We closed slightly lower for the week. It did trade almost the exact inverse to the US dollar, which is what you expect. This market doesn't trade on its own fundamentals very strongly. It does to some degree, but it's not particularly strong. It trades the inverse of the US dollar to a large degree. I note that volume was slightly increased and above the average this week on a fairly narrow spread. So there was some support in this market. And it appears that the market's attempting to hold on to this level rather than move down to that previous down bar's low. So we'll see how that plays out next week. You might see a bar more like this next week, which would suggest the market is going to attempt to consolidate sort of in this level. We'll watch for that next week. The pound very similar to the euro. Euro slightly stronger by the looks. Price is holding on to this level, which it has done for the past month. Volume was slightly increased and above average here too. So while this market's not strong, if that was all selling pressure, it would have broken these lows and probably closed down at this level or this level. So there was some buying support in this market, I expect. We'll see if that plays out next week. Similar to the euro, you might get something like this next week, at least early in the week anyway. Then the market will trade depending on how much supply is drawn out from that point forward. Japanese yen currency futures, they continue to drift lower. Volume increased to about average, but only just average. It's almost like the market is floating lower, though the volume suggests it was a little more than that. But price did attempt to move higher. That failed, and prices closed for the week below the previous down bar's low. And that suggests this market continues to be under pressure, and the buying support isn't enough to absorb the supply from the sellers at this point in time. This market remains weak. It may be reluctant to really stretch lower at this point, and maybe it needs a catalyst to do so, but this market is certainly weaker than stronger at this point in time. Aussie dollar currency futures, which have been trading so strongly more recently, really did see some weakness emerge this week. The market wasn't able to hold on to this level. It's broken below the previous 2 bars lows, and it's closed back at this level. This is another logical level for the market to move to, so it hasn't been left hanging. It's come back to a pretty logical level, and I expect the market will make an attempt to consolidate at that level. Bitcoin futures. Bitcoin futures closed lower this week and right down at the lows of this little trading range that I've marked quite some time ago now. Volume was slightly increased, but remains just a fraction below the average. I did expect the market would move lower in response to last week's bar this week. It's perhaps closed a little lower than I expected, so it's threatening to break down again here. You really want to see the market draw out some buying support and perhaps close like this or even up like that next week, because right at the lows of that trading range and right at the lows of this range, this longer term range where the market has found support in the background previously, this market's threatening to break down at this point. Now, this market has seen buying support emerge at this level previously, so we'll just have to watch and see how it goes. You don't really want to see a gap lower. This was an intentional gap lower previously, and that really locked people in here into weak positions. So you don't really want to see a gap lower. This happened over a weekend and into a Monday, and we're at that point again now. So you want to see buying support emerge here. It hasn't done so over the last couple of weeks, but it has done so previously at this level. So pay to watch carefully. Just back to the US dollar index futures quickly. You can see the market is consolidating within the range of this up bar and attempting to establish itself in this range here. And it's looking pretty comfortable up there at the moment. Volume was a little higher than you might expect, so there's buying support in this market. As the market dipped lower down here and below the previous bar's close, you've seen buyers come in, support the market, and that's pushed it back up into this new range. We'll follow it again next week because this market makes such a difference to all the associated markets. But I expect this market's going to attempt to establish itself in a new range in here, at least in the near term. Okay, thanks for your time. Back again next week. See ya.